contract. And at the end of that time, you know, the OCWD would be able supposedly to buy the plant for $1, but, you know, our concern was, well, what are we going to be buying? I mean, it could be a really, you know, the plant itself, that area might be up to 100 years old, so, because it's already like 60 years old. So anyway, we were concerned about the length of the contract, but the number one thing that we were concerned about, and it was almost universal, and it didn't matter if people were for desal or against desal. We did not like the fact that the price of the desalinated water was attached to the MET rate, the Metropolitan Water District. I'm going to call it the MET from now on. So it was attached to that. So what that means is basically, pretty much for the whole life of the contract, the water would never be less than the MET rate. And the MET, there's issues with that because it's not tied to the cost of the water, it's tied to this artificial structure. And what it means, do I have time to keep explaining? Okay, thank you. What it means is that for the first 10 years, it's the MET rate plus 20%. For year 10 through 20, it's the MET rate plus 15%. For year 20 through 30, it's the MET rate plus 10%. And 40 years out, it's the MET rate plus 5%. So those were very, very disturbing to us because the water would never, ever be less expensive. And then the last thing, which has just come up lately, and I want to make it really clear to the panel and everything, we never, ever discussed this accelerator. They have added in now an accelerating cost. And what that cost is, they told me it was a place keeper, but right now they've got it at 3%. And that will be an additional charge on top of this, you know, 2015 10 charge that they're allotting to us. It's a 3% for the life of the contract, and it's compounded every year. So right now, the cost of the Poseidon water on the figures and everything came down to about $1,900 an acre foot. Well, if you look at 15 years times this 3% compounded accelerator, that adds about $1,000 to the acre per acre foot. So now we're up in the neighborhood of, you know, $2,900-ish, etc. So, you know, with us just looking at it, whether you were for it or against it, we were really, really concerned about the cost. And we did ask, I know, come on, you're going to put me out here, but we did ask that if the committee would like, we would be more than happy to continue to serve. And it was an excellent committee. There's scientists on there and, you know, educators and everything. So it was a really good committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy to introduce our panelists. First, we have Zach Barrett, very end there. Zach Barrett worked for the City of Garden Grove Water Services Division for the past 37 years in the water distribution and production section, and recently retired as the Water Quality Supervisor. He ran for the Orange County Water District Board to represent Division 1, which includes Garden Grove, Westminster, and Stanton. He also ran for the Garden Grove City Council in the past. We have Pierce Swan from the Irvine Ranch Water District. Pierce Swan was elected to the Irvine Ranch Water District Board of Directors in 1979. After a term as Vice President of the Board, the directors elected him President, a position he held from December 1981 until December 1995, and again during 2006. He also served as Board Vice President in 2014. Mr. Pierre currently serves as Chairman of the Finance and Personnel Committee and the Water Banking Committee, and serves on other standing and ad hoc committees. In the past, he has served as Director to the Orange County Sanitation District and as a member of the Board of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Next, we have Mr. Ray Himstra, Orange County Coast Keepers. Ray Himstra has spent the last 15 years at Orange County Coast Keepers working on water issues. As Associate Director of Programs, his work includes water quality advocacy, policy development, marine protected areas, restoration, and monitoring. Ray is a Garden Grove resident and active member of the Sierra Club. And finally, we have Ms. Debbie Cook, former mayor of the city of Huntington Beach. Debbie Cook is a 30-year veteran of Orange County's political and environmental struggles, an attorney and a former elected official. Debbie speaks, writes, and blogs and organizes around water and energy issues, currently focused on the details of Poseidon's proposed ocean desalination project in Huntington Beach. So, our first presentation will be from Zach Barrett on our water system. Please.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Phil Anthony here. He's from Orange County Water District. He's our director for Garden Grove, the West End, so thank you, Phil, for showing up.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, please rise.
He's a very respectable man in the industry, over 40
Good evening,
years.
everybody.
Well, thank you.
I can't even say everything he's done, but he's a very highly respected man. He does represent Garden Grove on the West End and has influence on the East End, so thank you, Phil, for coming.
Glad to be here.
The city of Garden Grove was established, water department, in 1958, serving about 2,900 customers back then. Today, it is a part of the Public Works Department and is responsible for operating, maintenance, and improvement of 13 wells, 8 storage reservoirs with 53 million gallons of storage, about 2 days worth of storage during an emergency. 17 booster pumps with the capability of 47,000 gallons a minute. And we have approximately 400 miles of pipeline in the city of Garden Grove, which is maintained by our water department. We serve about 35,000 customers now in Garden Grove. We get about 70% of our water from wells and 30% of our water from ODOT. The basin we pump from is managed by OCWD. 92% of the city's water accounts are residential, and 71% of the city's water use is residential. In 2010, we used about 29,240 acre-feet of water, and in 2014, we're just over 26,000 acre-feet. Due to the water conservation measures, 1 acre-foot is equal to 326,000 gallons. And what 1 acre-foot is, if you folks don't know, imagine a football field, 12 inches tall is 1 acre-foot of water. We under the new state requirements to reduce to 141 gallons per person a day by 2020. This would mean we are projected to use just over 29,000 acre-feet a year. So as you can see, we do not need any more water. So if you have any other questions, we'll help you out with that after that. We want to get through with the professionals and their part. I'm just a long-time employee, / I just retired in December. I've lived in Garden Grove for 56 years. I understand our water system and the way it operates. I ran for Orange County Water District Board here last and just missed it by a few votes, but we'll be back again in 3 years on that. But if you have any questions after our panel, I'm more than glad to help you out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Pierre Salon to explain what is desalination.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. What is desalination? Very simply, it is a system that is set up to take salt out of water in various different concentrations. In Orange County, we have a number of desal plants that are already functioning, but they're taking salt levels that are more like 1,000 parts per million salt out versus ocean water, which is 36,000 parts. And the important thing is, as you run water through a membrane, the more salt that's in the water, the more pressure it takes to move the water through the membrane to take the salt molecules out. So it's a very expensive process. When you get to ocean water, it requires much more pressure. In fact, it uses more energy in that process than in pumping and moving the water around than it takes to bring water in from Northern California. It has another disadvantage in that Northern California water, the state water project, the Colorado Aqueduct, shuts off during portions of the day where you have peak power, and then operates on non-peak power. You know, desal plants are base-loaded plants. They use the same amount of power. They generally don't shut down very easily, and they take a bunch of time to start up when they do shut down. So they cannot shed this power. So it's an energy-intensive, method to move water, salty water, through a membrane to take the salt molecules out. And then that salt is then sent back to the ocean. And generally speaking, in ocean desal, you will run 2 acre-feet of water, 2 units of water through the plant in order to get one. The second acre-foot goes back to the ocean with the salt. So it's not as efficient as some of the other plants. On low TDS plants, you will get probably 95, 98% efficiency on that. In desal, ocean desal plants, it's about 50% under current technology. And I'll answer questions after the end, I guess. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We actually have a special guest here today. Actually, we have 2. First, I'd like to recognize Council Member Chris Beard, and also Chair of our Planning Commission, Mr. John O'Neill. We also have Planning Commission Vice Chair, Mr. Andrew Kanzler. There's several commissioners. Will all commissioners please rise just real quick? All right, please give a round of applause for them. Okay, thank you for being here, everybody. And next, Mr. Ray Gimstra on the environmental impacts.
So good evening. I'm going to take a moment to talk about the environmental impacts of desalination, because this is a really important issue. One of the things that people think about a lot when they hear about desalination is the price, because of course that's something that matters to everybody. But the environment really matters to everybody too, because this is a project, and these types of projects have the potential to impact not just our marine resources, but also even on the larger scale our climate. So one thing to think about is that if we were going to replace our imported water with desalinated water, it would take a plant the size of the Poseidon plant every 4 miles along the coast. So we use a lot of imported water, and these plants, while it sounds like a lot, it really would take a lot of them to replace that. So we need to think of other ways. To give you another example, if we built every proposed desal plant along the coast, and there's about 16 of them, that would still only produce about 6% of our water. The other thing is that desalination uses a lot of energy. So we're going to talk about energy later, but what's related to that energy use is production of greenhouse gases. So a plant the size of the proposed Poseidon Huntington Beach plant produces about 97,000 tons of carbon dioxide. So that's a really hard thing to get around and for people to understand. But the bottom line is that carbon dioxide is part of what's fueling climate change, and what the state and what most governments are looking at is how do we reduce our carbon dioxide production, how do we reduce that footprint. And putting together projects like this that need a lot of energy just add to that problem. And we need to look at ways of solving it rather than adding to that problem. One of the biggest impacts of desalination plants are the intakes. So if you're using ocean water, it seems fairly simple. You can go ahead and just pull that in. The ocean can seem like a big empty place when you're looking at it from the shore. But really, the ocean is teeming with life. So it's really important for us to go ahead and protect that. There's so much life in the ocean that, in fact, the state, back in 2010, passed a policy that requires all the coastal power plants to quit using open ocean intakes, because that's how much damage those do. It's a scientific fact. I can assure you, I'm sure everybody here realizes the state decided to have all the power plants quit using those intakes for no reason. So it's really a serious issue. So on there's subsurface intakes are one of the kinds that we can use. The pros about subsurface intakes are that they have less impact on marine life. You don't need to do any mitigation. The new statewide desalination policy says that if you use a subsurface intake, you're not going to have to pay a lot of money to replace the marine life you kill, because there's very little loss of marine life. You may have some when you install the intake, but after that, you don't have it. And they can also reduce operating costs long term. There are studies that show that if you use a subsurface intake, you may not have to do a lot of pre-treatment of your water, and that results in long-term costs. There are some cons to subsurface intakes. They can't be put in everywhere. For instance, if you've got an area offshore that's rock, you can't put subsurface intakes in rock. You're not going to be able to pull water through rocks. So they're not feasible for all locations. However, subsurface intakes are feasible at Huntington Beach. Coastal Commission Science Advisory Team has already determined that. So this is something that we can do at Huntington Beach. So the next kind is open water. So this is what's being proposed at this time. So basically what an open water intake is in Huntington Beach is a 14-foot tall giant opening. All of that seawater comes in, and everything that comes in with that seawater is destroyed as it goes through that plant. That's the Coastal Commission, the Water Board, everybody has determined that there's 100% mortality of everything that comes in. Now, there are ways to keep some of the larger animals. They put what's called a velocity cap on the intake now, so that it keeps things like dolphins and turtles and seals out of there. But still, a lot of life gets sucked in, especially the very small life. So with some of the thoughts, well, why don't we put screens on these open ocean intakes? Well, the Science Advisory Panel for the State Water Board that just looked at this determined that putting screens on an open ocean intake has about 1% effectiveness. So why are you even going to bother? You're still losing 99% of the marine life that's being pulled in. Why would somebody want to do that? Because it's cheap. That's the bottom line. The only real reason that you would want to use an open ocean intake is because you don't have to build something else. So, something to think about is that we can change the way things are. So right now it's proposed for an open ocean intake. Desalination can be done in a more friendly way. Using subsurface intakes is one of those. This is an example of what's called the source water area. So why are we so obsessed with the intakes? As you can see, this is the area from Palos Verdes all the way down to Dana Point. So this map was produced by Dr. Ramandi out of Santa Cruz, a very well-known oceanographer, hired by the State Water Board to do studies. This is the area where if you're a larvae, if you're something floating around out there, there's the chance that you're going to be entrained and pulled into this plant. So it's a very large area. Not everything's going to be pulled in from this area, but that's the chance. So it's not just something just around Huntington Beach. And when I talked about putting one every 4 miles along the coast, imagine if you had one even just every 20 miles along the coast. You're going to have the entire coast would turn into a source water area. This next slide, this is from the California Coastal Commission. That little red pyramid up at the top, that's the part of the marine life that when they measure the impacts right now of what they think is happening to the ocean, that's the part that actually gets measured. All that marine life in that pyramid below that is the marine life that we're not accounting for, that's being entrained, that we're losing, we're not going to have, but it's not being accounted for. So this is just an example of how complex some of this is. if we were really to be able to measure the impact that we're going to have on marine life and mitigate for that, we'd have to find a whole new way than we're doing it now, because we're missing a lot of that marine life that's being impacted. So next is the brine. So not only is the intake affecting things, but then you have a discharge. So brine is concentrated seawater, and that's being discharged, and it actually has impacts out in the area. The Coastal Commission has determined that this has significant impacts to wetlands, to the surface area around, and to the marine life in the area. So then what we're actually doing is, if this plant gets built as proposed, is we're determining that there's a section of our ocean, a fairly large section of our ocean, that we're going to sacrifice for this water. So as mentioned before, do we really need that? Because there's some sacrifices that we decide to make. And that's the thing that we hear all the time. One of the things that gets said all the time is, well, we have a permit, so there's no significant impacts to the environment. What that is a permit to pollute. The State Water Board has issued a permit to Poseidon. They've decided that the impacts from this idea are acceptable. Other people, including the Coastal Commission, so far think otherwise. Coastal Commission was not receptive of this project when it came through. This is a map of the extent of the brine plume from the proposed configuration. So as you can see, it comes all the way from right there by Newland Street, all the way down to just about the Santa Ana River. So this is an area that's going to have high salinity. There's going to be other discharges from the plant, because there's lots of things that go on in a desalination plant. It's not just discharging saline brine. So the fish, anything like that, they're going to move away if possible. The way I like to describe it is, it's not going to kill you outright. How many people have been down to Palm Springs in August or something like that? It gets really hot, okay? Isn't going to kill you, but it's pretty miserable. So what do? You get out of there as quick as possible, or get to an air-conditioned spot. That's what the marine life in this area is going to do. It's just going to get out. So what we're going to end up with is an area with a lot less marine life than we have right now. So what this really comes to is a tale of good versus bad desalination. And I want to address the idea that the environmental community is not against desalination. A lot of people realize that this is a tool in the toolbox. We're going to need it at a certain point. What we want to do is do it right. In Orange County, we have a perfect example of good versus bad. There's a lot of people don't realize there's two ideas for a desalination plant in Orange County. Down in Dina Point, they want to put a desalination plant in that uses subsurface wells. It's located down in South Orange County, where they import 90% of your water. If you're going to need a desal plant, that's probably a good idea why you need it. It's also much smaller. It's sized for what's really needed. It's for an emergency supply down there. So what you've really got is something that's built with the best technology, sited where it needs to be, and for a good reason. On the other hand, we have bad desalination, which uses open ocean intakes, is sited where it was easy at one time to build something, or you think you might be able to persuade somebody to put it, and it's basically built to generate cash. Now that's what corporations do. There's nothing wrong with being a corporation, there's nothing wrong with turning a profit. But is that really what we want for our ocean? Is that the trade-off that we want to make? Or should we just go ahead and, if we need a desal plant somewhere, should we put it there and make and build it right? So, just to summarize, the Poseidon idea falls well short of what we want, not only in Orange County, but California. According to the statewide desalination policy that was just developed, subsurface intakes are the preference. If it's possible to put one in, you should be putting it in. You'd also should be using a better brine discharge thing than just letting it go out. The way this current brine discharge is developed, it could just mushroom and crawl along the seafloor. There's things called spray brine diffusers that will diffuse it really quickly, and we won't have as big an impact. So there's better ways to do this. And I would like to urge you to think about that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Ms. Debbie Cook.
Thank you. Okay, desalination is not a subject that can be discussed in simplistic terms. It's not about being for desal or against desal, or for jobs or against jobs, or for water, or the other option is not any water. Because that kind of binary thinking keeps us from discussing the really complex management issues that we face with water, and every district has its own complexities. In my 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about the fiscal impacts of desalinated water, and not in a broad brush sense, but specifically how this project relates to Orange County Water District. Because, as I said, every water agency has its own issues to face. And so we have to look at each situation uniquely. And we are not Central Valley, we're not San Diego, we are Orange County Water District, and that's how it should be addressed. So as you can see from this map, the Orange County Water District does not serve all of Orange County. Only cities and agencies that overlie the aquifer are members. 2.3 million people are the beneficiaries of this large body of water that holds 66 million acre-feet of water. The Orange County Water District only manages the top 500,000 acre-feet of water. They also manage the infrastructure that recharges the basin. South Orange County cities are not members, and most of their water, as Ray said, is imported, about 90%. They get most of their water either from the Colorado River Aqueduct or from the State Water Project. So we're two different beasts with different circumstances. South County agencies should consider whether it's best for them, and I think every agency should have a fresh look at desal and how it affects them. So everyone asserts that we need more water, but no one actually discusses what that means. Does the Orange County Water District need more water? Or maybe the question is, when is enough enough? And then the logical follow-up question is, who should pay for that water? Who should pay to satiate all those who can't reduce their consumption? And this chart is very clear to show you. There's Garden Grove at 134, Huntington Beach is 109, Fountain Valley 109, Westminster is 98, all the way down to Steel Beach 65, and then you look at communities like Villa Park at 539, and you go, something's wrong here, something's wrong with this picture. So as it currently stands, the cost of the water managed by Orange County Water District is melded or blended so that everybody pays the same amount. So no matter how much they use, they are paying the same amount. But if the water were allocated on a per capita basis, so if you took the total amount of water that will be produced from the basin this year, which is 322,000 acre-feet, and you divide it by 2.3 million people, you come up with a figure of 125 gallons per person per day. That's how much water each one of us could use if we only got water from the basin. But of course, as has been pointed out, we use 70% of our water comes from the basin, 30% is imported. So if we were able to conserve and get down to 110, let's carve off some for business and industry, and let's say 110, then we could get theoretically all of our water from the basin and not have to import any water. If the residents of Santa Cruz can get down to 50 gallons per person per day, I think we can get down to 100. I think that's fairly achievable. So here's the water cost comparison, because Orange County has, the water district gets water from different sources. The three bars on the left show you pretty much where they're getting water, the cost of that water. They also get water that just falls from the sky. And the purple block is imported water. It's what we buy that's above and beyond that 70%. And then the gray bar is what it costs in San Diego for the Carlsbad desalination project, $2,367. Now, albeit that $2,367 is without subsidies, and in this project, they're hoping for large subsidies, but even those expire after 15 years. So as I said, our water comes from different sources. There's incidental recharge from rain, and these things fluctuate. Incidental recharge can fluctuate year to year from 20,000 acre-feet all the way up to 140,000 acre-feet. So year to year, you can have wild fluctuations in water and in stream flows and that sort of thing. But that's what's so great about the basin. You can use it as a bank. So I wanted to talk too about where this water is going to go. Orange County Water District doesn't actually know where this water is going to go. They haven't decided because they already have a pipeline that goes up to the basin that takes our groundwater replenishment water, which is 100 million gallons a day. That pipe was sized to accommodate that and not extra capacity. And they don't really, since they don't really need the water, they're talking about how do we get agencies outside of the water district to take or pay, pay for this water, whether they need it or not. So if we have floods next year, they'd still have to take that water. And that's a really tough sell. Poseidon couldn't do it. They've tried for the last 15 years to get agencies to take, or it's called a take or pay contract, where you take the water whether you need it or not. And if you don't take the water, you still have to pay for it. But what really drives the cost of desal is energy. Energy can be up to half the cost of desalinated water. And as you can see, there's a wide range of energy inputs. The groundwater replenishment system is one of the lowest at 1,500 kilowatt hours per acre foot. With desalination, ocean desal water is 5,000 kilowatt hours per acre foot. And they will make some advancements, but there's some limit to which you cannot go below when it comes to the energy component. Plus, it takes energy to pipe that somewhere. You've got to build the infrastructure and then move it, and that's additional energy. So we know that electricity rates are not going to go down. We've never seen that. And that's why ocean desalinated water will always rise faster than imported water. Imported water uses hydroelectricity to move that water. It's only 20% of the total cost of imported water. And as you can see, as electricity rates up, just 1 penny can cost us a huge amount of money. If they're able to get a rate of 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which I think might be doubtful, it would cost $27 million a year just for the electricity costs. Now, Poseidon has offered, they've suggested that, well, maybe they'll do renewable energy so they can take care of some of the carbon emissions that Ray mentioned. But here's the reality. If they were to offset all of their energy use with solar, this is a project in Spain, they'd have to build 4 times this. Basically, it would cover more than the size of the city of Los Alamitos. And, if any of you have solar in your home, I know I do, the first thing you do is you start eliminating things. You get efficient appliances, you replace light bulbs, you do all that before you buy the solar plant. So here, we need to take care of all of those things before we go down that desal route. And the Orange County Water District's rates have been climbing faster than MWD's rates, actually. And a lot of that is the replenishment system, which was definitely worth it, and it's only slightly more with the subsidies. It's only slightly more than other water they have available to them. But it's still driving the costs up. And if this project is built, it will drive the costs up infinitely more than they've ever had historically. One of the reasons that this project is claimed to be needed is because there's a claim that population's growing, and therefore we have more demand. Well, the truth is, all agencies submit their demand projections to Orange County Water District, and then the Water District then in turn projects a demand. But the reality is our demand has not been climbing because of code changes and efficiencies and demographics and things like that. Our demand has actually been going down, and we're not unique. It's been going down across the West. And then what happens with the 25% cuts that we're making that the governor has mandated? If we make those cuts, even if we only make 10%, it's still demand that's going down. So the bottom line is we really don't know what the costs on this project will be because there's so many unanswered questions. It's probably going to take years before they've answered all the questions and they've gotten all the permits and they've jumped through all the hoops. But we can only, as Tony Grant, who was a radio psychologist years ago, used to say, the best indication of future behavior is past behavior. The only thing we can do is compare it to what's happened in Carlsbad, the same size project. And down there, we do know what it's costing. It's $116 million a year. And albeit this one I think will be much less because we will get the subsidies, it's still twice to 3 times more than the cheapest water that we have available. So these are just some of the issues that still have to be addressed. And you know, we could go on for hours talking about desal here, but we want to get really to your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. At this time, I'd like to invite Pierce Swan to come back up to talk about alternatives.
Okay, you've heard all this, so I won't do this. First of all, I'm the elected director of Irvine Range Water District, and I want to tell you what when I stand before you, I have to tell you what the district's position is. We're not supporting a project if the water cost from the project is greater than the MWD cost, which it is. We're not supporting a project that has, you know, the independent districts of the cities in the county financing any part of it in a direct financing, like building a pipeline or building a plant itself. Because we don't want the risk, you know, falling on the cities and the districts. If the project fails, then the cities and the districts will be, you know, we have to pay the price. We don't think they should take that risk. And number 3, we don't want the water quality, you know, to interfere with our existing recycled water project. We don't want to take, you know, any water from the Poseidon project. It's going to shut down a 22,000 acre-foot a year recycled water project. So most of you know right now with the current situation, you know, we've had multiple dry years. It's been like 7 years that we've had dry years. We've had 1 wet year in the middle. And then 1 wet year, it's amazing in California, we more or less filled all the reservoirs the prior 3 years that emptied. We fill reservoirs and storage, you know, from the urban side very quickly. We're starting off this coming year with half a year of supply already in the bank in MWD. So without getting any more water, they have half a year of water already available for this year if they want to spend it. And they're not planning on doing that, they're only taking a small slice out of that. We had a dry year, and we have a 20% allocation from the state water project, and we have much warmer temperatures, and we have a significant overdraft to the groundwater basin, especially in the Central Valley. Although, you know, we have, you know, drawn down over time the water supply that Orange County Water District considers their operating range, down roughly 3/4 of that. So the desalter, you know, is a 50 MGD plant that's about 54,000 acre feet a year. That's 54,000 football fields, 1 foot deep. You know, produces, you know, water. You know, an acre foot takes care of a family of 8, more or less, a year. It's a take-or-pay contract. You know, you have to have a pipeline. As Debbie said, they haven't been successful in selling this to any of the water districts in the city. So the Orange County Water District is sort of their last chance to recoup the $40 or $50 million they've already put into this, you know, deal. No one's really sure about what it's going to cost per acre foot, but somewhere between 1800 and 2200 an acre. Someone is going to pay for that. That won't necessarily directly go into water costs because they'll get subsidies from MWD and other places. But we all know those subsidies come from funds that we all pay into these other buckets, and they're just redistributed back to us. The current MWD cost for untreated water roughly $700 if you put all the connection fees and, you know, peaking charges in. You know, Poseidon is going around saying, we're going to charge you, you know, 20% above that treated rate. Well, OCWD generally does not buy, you know, treated water. They buy untreated water. So this, you know, the price that Poseidon is talking about using is, you know, at least 2 times what, you know, OCWD normally buys water. So that's sort of a background. So the 10-year cost, and pardon me for a second, I'm going a little dry. At 54,000 acre feet at $1,900 is over $1 billion every 10 years. So you would, you know, pay in this roughly the cost of this is you would pay for 10 years for the 54,000 acre feet, $1,200 over what your alternative costs were, or $378 million. Where is the pointer go to? Okay. Can you make it go forward? Okay, yeah. If you look at the 10 years and you assume that in a 10-year cycle, and this is a conservative way of looking at it, you have 2 dry years where you're allocated from MWD, and you have 8 years in which you can buy as much water as you want from MWD because there's no allocation. Then what you would see, if OCWD bought, you know, 13,500 acre feet in each of those 8 years, they would have the same amount of water stored into the basin as the Poseidon plant would use during the 2 years where you're in allocation. The only time you need Poseidon water is when there's an allocation or a shortage. You know, all the rest of the time, you have plenty of water available from MWD. So the 10-year cost of desal water is $1 billion. 8 years of imported water, $345 million. The 2 years that you buy additional water over the first 8 years is $108 million. So the total cost of just buying water that's freely available, you know, versus the Poseidon water is that every 10 years, just by doing that, you would save over $570 million. So you could provide the same amount of water here in the Orange County Basin as the Poseidon plant does. That would be over $500 million cheaper every 10 years. So the 10-year saving, $572 million. There's no new capital needed in this plan because we already have the wells, you know, existing. We already have the pipelines existing. This water can be delivered through existing, you know, services. So this is a frugal person's look at how you minimize the cost and maintain the same reliability as you would if you had Poseidon. And if you are still worried that you need something else, you've got $570 million every 10 years that you can go out and spend for some other project. Now, are there other projects available? Of course there is. You can pre-buy water, you know, up in Kern County. You can buy other people's water rights. You can put wells along the West County border with, you know, with LA County and take, you know, try to capture the water that slides into LA County every year. The LA guys are very smart. They run their water basin lower than the Orange County Basin, so the water just slips out of our basin into theirs. If we put wells along there and use that, we could stop that. So there are many ways, creative ways to look at it. So I will look forward to questions at the end of this. Thank you, Mark.
has been very informative, and once again, thank you to all of our panelists for being here, and also thank you to the advisory committee member, Councilwoman Dina from Westminster, for sharing your remarks, which adds to the presentation that we just had too. At this time, I'd like to hand this over to our Public Works Director, Mr. Bill Murray, to host our question and answer portion. So you have a question? Go ahead.
I don't have any questions other than why this mic apparently it makes noise. But for any of you that want to come
Your
up
mic?
and ask a question,
Your mic?
I'm sorry, the mic isn't.
You can come over here and use this
Yeah,
one.
you know, and the thing is, for anybody that wants to come up and ask a question, please do so. If you want to come on over to this, well, the mic's not really working, but come on up. And if not, I know the mayor has some questions as well. So, is there anybody that has anything that's popping out to them, or that they want to go over?
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell.
I don't think I need a microphone. I have 2 points. Number one, with the advent of global warming and the fact that the ice caps continue to melt, the salinity level of the oceans is changing. And I'm wondering about the effect that the plume of brine being released into the ocean will have a counteracting effect. That's one point. The other thing is, Mr. Mayor, I have heard some excellent viewpoints here expressed on opposition to the Poseidon project. However, it would seem equally fair to at least have had one person from the project here to respond.
Let me respond to that. I'm not a scientist, so I can't respond to the first question. But I imagine since the oceans are really large, it would take a long time. For your second question, I had invited some folks to come and be part of the panel, but they were unable to. So we also invited our own water district representative, Ms. Dina Nguyen, as well, to be present. And she said she was going to be here, but she's not here. So I'm very open to hearing from the other side. But I also want to make it very clear, too, that this is something that affects our city in a very unique way. And it seems that we're already a minority voice in the discussion. So it's very important that we do have this particular forum to bring forward this perspective, while the dominant perspective is the other side. Any other questions? Sir?
My name's Steve Sanders. Who votes on this? And what type of vote or portion of a vote do you have for this coming from our community?
The vote will come from the Orange County Water District. And right now, from what I've read, there's been a non-binding vote. So things are moving forward. If you have anything else to add?
Yes, sir. Right now, what the OCWD has done is simply voted to enter into negotiations in what they call in the term sheet. And we had an explanation from our council member from Westminster on all of the different aspects of what they're looking at. OCWD is basically doing due diligence at this point, and it's going to take about almost a year before we have a final contract. So there is still time to voice your opinion, and that's going to be through your Orange County Water District board member, which is Ms. Dina Nguyen, and we're going to be providing her contact information later. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and to that, if they decide that they're going to have the contract with Poseidon, what we're trying to do, like as a city, and what you're trying to do is decide if you are going to be a part of that contract. Because right now, the how they divided it up, originally it was Poseidon doing everything, and now Poseidon is producing the water, but the OCWD is actually distributing the water, and so they have to go out and find buyers who will buy the water. If they decide that they're going to have a contract with Poseidon, but they don't have buyers, then that would they'd have to build injection wells and that type of thing to put the water back into the ground. Am I correct on that?
More or less.
More or less, okay.
There's still a large state of flux on that. Sir, does that answer your question?
I I'd like to add to that too. As mayor of Garden Grove, and I know that our entire city council, we want to hear from our residents. So, if this is important to you, you want the city to stand a particular way, we do have staff to give us recommendations, but we're also interested in listening to the perspective of the public. So the council meetings are always open for you. Sir?
I have heard it said that Poseidon was selected without a competitive bid process, and I'm wondering why. Or are there any other people proposing to build a desal plant other than Poseidon?
Well, at this particular venture, OCWD is simply negotiating with Poseidon. I believe, as you pointed out, under a lot of different contracts, you would naturally expect an RFP type of process. And Poseidon's the one that's really generating this as an option on their own. OCWD didn't actively go out and issue an RFP for a desalination plant. And so essentially what's happening is Poseidon is coming to, not now OCWD. Previously they went to a lot of different cities and tried to orchestrate this more or less on their own. And OCWD is kind of the last venture for them, at least here in North Orange County.
Is there any reason OCWD doesn't go out with an RFP?
Actually, I think Poseidon has a lock on the AES power plant, so they have the site locked up. So no one else can use it because they have an arrangement with the AES plant. So you would have to find another site if you were going to put.
You could certainly put out an RFP and find out if someone can do that.
That's a great question for OCWD.
But it might be better not to build a plant at all and just to use what you already have.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'm disappointed that Dina's not here, since she's the voice for us. And then you said you would give us her contact information?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you do that?
Can you go ahead and put the slide up? There we go. Not that one. Yeah, it'll come up shortly, and they said we're trying to simply provide this information to you. I know that I do have a couple of questions. One of them is to Ray, actually, and it's whether or not the Poseidon project is going to use the subsurface intakes, or is just using the existing ones.
So the current plan from Poseidon is to use the existing intakes. The Coastal Commission may make a different determination on that, but the plan for 15 years has been to use the existing open ocean intake.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve. So one question I have is, since we've got the Carlsbad plant being built, and we have all these questions about the Huntington Beach plant, and right now it seems like we have enough water for a bit, and we know the environment. One thing for sure, the environment will always change. There's no getting around that. So has anyone thought of just watching what happens with the Carlsbad plant for a few years, see how it runs, study the impact before we even consider the plant here in Huntington? I guess I'm wondering, what's the rush to build? And I know this has been going on for about 12 years, 11 or 12 years, but why jump into it right now when we've got this plant that we can actually watch? And let's see what happens there.
Debbie, you would like to answer this one?
Actually, somebody put it at one of the meetings, they should use it as a beta site. Yes, so that has been raised, and it was raised by the Citizens Advisory Committee. And so as a consideration for that concern, the district has agreed to wait 30 days or 90 days. They'll let it test it for 90 days, which really isn't very long. But they said they would allow it to test 90 days.
Okay. Way in the back.
Well, I'm not sure that I understood all of the information about the salt that is going to be produced, which is exactly
exactly how the ocean is going to handle it. Then I'm not absolutely sure about the way you talk about the non-committal contract. Am I using the right term? You're just talking about it, you're not committed to anything, you're just talking back and forth to see if you want to do it. Is that where you're at?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and address the negotiation part. That's pretty easy. It's like if you go to use a car dealership and you want to purchase a car, you're going to meet with their finance manager, and he's going to give you, this is how much the car costs. These are all the various charges, and this is your interest rate, and this is how much it's going to cost you a month. That's an equivalent to what a term sheet is, where it kind of lays out all of that. There is currently a preliminary term sheet, and that has a long way to go before it becomes a contract. In the term sheet right now, in terms of one of the deadlines, is that all needs to be resolved by December of next year, mid-December. And for your other question regarding the effects on the seawater, I'll turn that over to Ray.
So for the brine plume, that effect's going to be localized. So the map I showed was about a half-mile area around the outfall. So that area is going to feel the effects. That's using the current proposed existing outfall. If there was a better, what's called a spray brine diffuser, which would do a better job of dispersing the brine, it would shrink that down and have a smaller impact. But this plant alone won't have a larger effect on the ocean, but it will certainly create a localized effect and create an area of the state park there that's going to be impacted.
So am I understanding correctly, it produces the salt, which is shot back out into the ocean, and it all the waves and the currents and everything is going to bring it back up onto the coast and spill on the marine life before it has a chance to settle to the bottom.
As the water is pulled in, half of it is taken out and turned into drinking water. The other half comes out as a concentrated brine. That will come out, and as you said, will be spread out and carried by wave action and crawl along the seafloor using the existing outfall and be dispersed rather slowly. By using a different type of outfall, you could spray that through nozzles and disperse that much more quickly. You still aren't going to eliminate the area that's impacted, but you can shrink it quite a bit.
I'll get right to you, Mr. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a couple questions. I wonder if any of the panelists could speak to the issue of the fact that this project will not bring a single additional drop of water to the Orange County area, that it will replace imported water at 3 to 10 times the cost. And also the reason why, if you can, Poseidon has said there will be no project if they are required to do subsurface intake instead of the way it is now.
Zach is raising his hand.
Well, we looked at two sources. One, we were looking at the West Orange County Water Board. Chris Beard is our rep for Garden Grove on that, is shifting the water up on that pipeline coming into Garden Grove to go to Knock Chapman Import, which is located in Knock Chapman. And we've never used that in the 30-some years I've been here. Our water demands are going down, so actually to push water up to us, it's not needed at this time. It's just, it's not there.
Charles is next, sir. We'll get right to you. Mr.
I'd just like to address real quickly, though, the other part of that was about the subsurface intake. We heard the same thing from AES. I was there, and they said the AES is the power plant that now has to quit using this intake and outfall. They said at the time that if they had to quit using that, they were going to shut the plant down. It wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to rebuild the plant. Well, when the state made the policy and required them to do it, guess what? They're not going to use the outfall. They're building dry cooling, and they're not going to impact the ocean anymore. I think if it comes down to where Poseidon can only make $2 billion instead of $3 billion, I think they're still going to do it.
I think my other question might have been misunderstood. I mean that the project will, since it's going to get subsidies, it will be required to replace an equal amount of water that it produces, imported water. It will cost more. Can you speak to that? There won't be any additional water. It'll just cost more.
One of the conditions to getting the subsidy from MWD is that it doesn't. MWD is not going to forego any water that they have right to right now from the Colorado River, the State Water Project. So desalinated water is additional water. It is not replacing water that's in the Delta or in the Colorado River or anywhere else. It's above and beyond the water that we already get.
It's at about 8%.
Does that make sense?
8%.
Hang on. Charles, you had a,
Follow-up question on the brine. Sanitary district processes all of our wastewater, and they separate out all the solids, and those are transported to other locations. Is there a possibility of, instead of putting the brine back into the ocean, putting it into a process where it's solidified and transported to another site?
I believe that would make this project so cost exorbitant that it wouldn't even be close to being feasible. You're talking about additional trucking costs and additional property which to lay out all of that salt. I just don't, Charles, I don't see that happening. And you, sir, you've been raising your hand.
Thank you. I'm just asking a question. Has anybody given serious consideration to the fact that Poseidon has yet to build a successful desalination plant? The one they built in Tampa Bay, Florida, they failed to produce the water they said they were going to produce. They filed bankruptcy and left that water district with millions of dollars in debt. Has anybody considered this?
I'm not sure that that's part of the term sheet.
No, it's not. To be fair, they are building what looks like it's going to be an operating plant in San Diego, but they're not actually building it themselves. Shea is building it, another construction company. They're just managing the contract. And they are not going to operate it for very long because that's not how they operate. They may build and manage, but I don't want to speak on Poseidon's behalf, but I believe that that's actually that's the way they'll sell it to someone else and then someone else will operate it.
Okay, I'd like to wrap up, so I'll take 2 more questions. Okay, so Marie Blackman.
Will the Cardinal city website post a link or some type of information to keep us up to date on what's going on with the OCWD?
The OCWD does have their own website. We could probably link their website to ours. That wouldn't be a problem. We'll have that done. That's easy. And then, ma'am?
I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for having this. I had no idea what was going on until I came in for the forum. I've heard enough that I don't want this to happen, whether for environmental reasons, financial reasons, whatever. I'm completely convinced. But when you put her number up there, I mean, when she was at the councilwoman, she never returned my calls. So if I call her now, I don't know what to expect from her. So is there a way to stop this from happening?
What I can advise you is, I believe that's the number that's provided by the Orange County Water District. That's her contact. Definitely try again. And then also,
She's not even here.
okay. I'd also advise you, if you hear a lot about this and you'd like the city council to consider staff's recommendation, whether it's for or against or whatever it is, to come to our council meeting. And public comments begin at 6:30. This is the Garden Grove City Council. The next meeting that we're having is on Tuesday, May 26th. And it's right here in the Community Meeting Center in the council chambers across from the atrium. Okay? And also, definitely encourage you as well, if you can make it to the Orange County Water District meetings.